The way they work is whatever the minority is has to receive 51%. So let's say you're doing a women-owned business. The women-owned company has to get at least 51% of the business. So what you see a lot of times is a small business fronting the contract and a big business giving them the flexibility and the depth of resources that they need to actually perform. As long as the small business is getting 51% and the large business is getting 49%, it's fine.
And there are advantages for pursuing these certifications or acknowledgments because of a PRIMES requirement by the government to meet those numbers that they are subcontracting with those types of certified businesses.
Yes.
And most of our region is hub zone, so that's a huge advantage as well.
Yeah. So basically, the more of these certifications that you qualify and get, that means that anytime the government has to meet a hub zone requirement and they do it as a set aside, it means that only hub zone companies can go after it. Your chances of winning go up much higher than if you're in a full and open competition against IBM, for example, right? So that's why the more certifications you can get, the better.
And I do know, based on the latest numbers, that's my interject on this point, is that some of these prime contractors are having a hard time meeting those numbers. So they're looking for companies.
Your input is invalid.
She and I are going to step outside. I'm from Wise County. I don't put up with that. But yeah, so you're really helping those companies meet their requirements, and so they're looking for you. So that's why we want to make sure we're connecting you with them. And that's all I'm saying. Fun.
We're going to have a whole section on small business stuff tomorrow, but just to give you a case in point, if you look at Lockheed, Northrop, any of the big federal government contractors, and you go to their career website, you will see a whole bunch of open positions. If you have anybody that can do any of that work, you can call Northrop and say, how about entering into a subcontract for these 5 positions? And they'll be my company employees. I'll charge you an hourly rate to do this work on the government. Northrop or Lockheed or any of those companies would be thrilled with that proposition because every day that that job is open on their company website, they are losing money that they could be getting from the federal government. So they're going to take your price, they're going to add their profit to it and submit it as a price to the, or they've already submitted it, they already have the contract because they're actually hiring for these positions. But we always think about federal government contracting as us in direct relationship to the government, but there's other ways to get federal dollars that we'll talk about tomorrow. Section L, you must pay attention to, because Section L is how the government wants to see your proposal. So, I do a lot of consulting with companies on how to win government business, and I tell them, if you ever have a proposal manager who says, this is how the government wants to see our proposal, but you know what? It would make us look so much better if we presented it like this, because this is a fully integrated story and all this other stuff. Run for the hills, because there is no way possible you can win that contract. Why? Because when your proposal goes in and all the different vendors submit at the same time, that SSA person, the Source Selection Authority, has established a team of people to evaluate the proposals. And let's say, for example, there's you have to provide a product, you have to provide training, and you have to provide maintenance. They will have one evaluator evaluate the part of your proposal that talks about the product for all the vendors. They will have another evaluator do all the maintenance, and another one do all the training. Why do you think they have the same evaluator do all of them? The same section. Right. If we all evaluated something right here and now, some of us would be really hard evaluators, some of us would be a little loosey-goosey. And so the government wants to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake, because if you're being evaluated by a really hard evaluator and you're being evaluated by a soft evaluator, it's not going to be fair. But if all of maintenance is kind of loosey-goosey, then that's fair to all competitors. So when that source selection authority gives out the sections of the RFP, they have put together a source selection plan for every single requirement for how they're going to evaluate you. So if you offer exactly what the requirement says, you get a meets requirement. But if you give them, instead of 12 months, you give them 15 months, you're going to get plussed up because you're giving them more than what they asked for. And so the government's going to come up with how they're going to assign points for every single factor of the RFP. So your proposal, all the proposals come in, I get all the training sections. I'm an evaluator, I get all the training sections. I look at the RFP document of what our training requirements were written as stated. I look at the evaluation criteria of how I'm going to be able to assign points. And then I look at vendor A's proposal. And I say, okay, the first thing you're supposed to talk about is the quality of your instructors. And if the first thing I look at over here is quality of instructors, I am good to go. If the first thing I look at over here is how the classrooms are set up, I now have to look through this proposal and see. And guess what? I may have a lot of patience to look through your proposal and find your section on instructors. I may have zero tolerance. And quite frankly, sometimes there are 3 proposals that come in. Sometimes there are 100 proposals that come in. I guarantee you, a government contracting officer, if you don't meet the mark right off the bat, they're going to be more inclined to throw you in the trash can and kick you out of the competitive range than to spend time looking through your proposal. So you want to follow section L exactly. And when they tell you you have 20 pages, don't think you have 21. They will open up your proposal, they will rip off the last page, they will count 20 pages, they will rip off the last page, and they will send it back to you. Or throw it in the trash can. So, very, very particular, because they don't want to give anybody another again. When they tell you a 12-point font, we don't mean a 10-point font. Because you can get more words on a page with 10-point, which means you would have an unfair advantage over somebody else. Okay, so that's why you need to pay attention to section L. And then the source selection plan that I mentioned, beautiful source selection plan where the government figures out all the points for every single thing. Do you think that they share that with us? No. Instead, what they do is they kind of write like a 5th grade math problem. You know, factor A is 2 times more important than factor B minus factor C. It's just crazy something. So all they give you here is some words about what you can assume is more important. Is technical merit more important than future plans? Is cost less important than management qualifications? That kind of stuff to help you gauge what you think is more important. Help you gauge what they think is most important. And then this is what companies use to protest. So let's say, for example, the government says cost is the #1 factor. And you come in $200 less than your competitor, and your competitor wins. Well, guess what? You have grounds for protest because they said their #1 priority was cost. So, you know, you would have grounds for a protest there because they weren't following their source selection. Any questions about the sections in RFP?
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I had to do an RFP for a state here last year, and it looked like a kindergartner put this thing together, because the same question was asked in 4 different sections 3 times. But we answered it all those times, just copy and paste, thank goodness for that. I don't know how I used to do it with an old typewriter, but it was pretty annoying, quite frankly, and I'm sure we still run into that with all the other RFPs.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I've noticed is it used to be that the government would write their own RFPs. And now what they're doing is they're contracting out to contractors who know nothing about their system or their requirements. And it has to do with the fact that there's this, deficit of contracting officers. Because it takes a lot of coordination within an agency to get the requirements right. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, you talked about protesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you know that you would need to protest? I mean, do you have access to see what the other bids are, what the accepted contract is and the value and the?
Yeah, so, well, the only thing that you know at contract award is the price of the winning bid.
Okay.
You don't have access to their stuff. If you decide to protest, we have a whole section on this, I'll just talk about it briefly. But basically, you can't represent yourself in a protest. You have to hire outside counsel that will represent you. And that outside counsel will write up the basis for what they think the issue is. So they'll listen to you and they'll, you say to them, well, their number one factor was price and, we were the lowest cost, so we're the lowest price, and we don't understand why we did. And they would write that up. And then through discovery, the contracting officer would share certain information with the third-party attorney that the third-party attorney can't share with you because you're an active bidder. But they could make a recommendation to you as to whether you should go forth with your protest or not. But I'll tell you two things. One is that anytime you're dealing with outside attorneys, it's expensive. And around the Beltway in DC, this is a very profitable business line for attorneys. And secondly, your chances of winning are slim because the government has been messed with so many times with contractors protesting, they really try to minimize it. And I'll give you one example that my company did. When these contracts were taking like 3 years, you are vested. This is the only acronym you've spoken for 3 years, right? Your heart and soul is into this. And when they don't award to you, your ego gets in the way. And what they are required to do, if you ask for it, is they will provide you a debrief. But what the debrief is here were our requirements, and here's how your company only compared to each of those requirements. They won't tell you what your competitors did, because that would be giving you a competitive advantage in your future efforts. So they're very careful about what they say. So it becomes very scripted, and you don't, you get some stuff out of it, but not so much. So we had a situation where we lost, and we protested. And the government made their decision, and we still lost, and we still didn't like it, so we protested again. And we lost, and the very next procurement that contracting shop ran, we decided to go after it, and I was the program manager. What do you think the chances are that we would have won that contract under any circumstances? If somebody had tried to poke holes at the way you were doing purchasing in your company twice,